I'm Josh Golke, the Deputy Opinion Editor for the Bee, and I'd like to welcome all the candidates running for the 10th Assembly District, which includes Elk Grove and South Sacramento. Thanks everyone for your time, and we'll start with opening statements. We can go in alphabetical order. And that would be Mr. Guerra would go first. And 2 minutes each, please.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, good afternoon. I'm Eric Guerra, local council member. I grew up picking fruit as a farm worker, and as early as the age of 5, I joined my mother in the fields, working 12-hour days in the sun. I earned my engineering degree here at Sac State, and then appointed by Governor Davis to the Board of Trustees for the Cal State University system. I spent 18 years working in the legislature fighting for working families, and with my local experience, I know how to get things done in the Capitol. I've chaired our county planning commission and fought against NIMBYism to build housing for working families, and went after illegal gravel miners who were digging in our Consumnes River levees, those that could have affected our environment. And I championed the human trafficking ordinance to go after illegal massage parlors in our county. And then when elected to the council, I drafted the ordinance to stop that modern day slavery for women. And I used my state experience to bring down $1.2 million of state funding to address human trafficking for our county. I know what it's like to be homeless and live in my car. That's why I worked with Weave and St. John's to get the first Project Home Key application and build St. John's Square so homeless families and children can have a future. And I was the maker of the motion of the comprehensive siting plan and the maker of the motion of our housing trust fund for affordable housing in last year's mid-year budget. I've drafted language for SB 41 to use vacant property on Stockton Boulevard for affordable housing and childcare. And I'm proud to say we're starting construction soon. And as chair of our county air quality management district, I've fought for the environment, making Elk Grove Unified and Twin Rivers Unified the largest electric school bus fleet in the nation, and created the most expansive air quality monitoring system. And as chair of our county's employment training agency and our county library authority, I fought to make sure that funding goes to low-income families and low-income communities for adult learning, workforce development, and creating our county's child care task force. I know what it's like not to have health care. I know what it's like not to have child care. And I know what it's like to work hard. And I want to use those experiences and my years in the legislature to start day one fighting for working families. Finally.
Thanks. We'll get to questions and have more time soon. I think next we have Ms. Nguyen.
I'm Stephanie Nguyen. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit organization here in town, but I'm also a council member for the city of Elk Grove. The entire city will be in this District 10 here, but I want to go back and say that I'm a daughter of Vietnamese war refugees. My parents came here during the fall of Saigon, and we relied on every single public assistance program that was available. As a Medi-Cal baby, as a food stamp child, I know exactly what it's like to struggle, which is why for the last 15 years, I've worked in this nonprofit to uplift struggling families. I've worked directly with communities on the ground, ensuring that they have access to resources and services to get them one step closer to self-sufficiency. In the last 10 years, I've led this organization, which means that during this pandemic, during the last 2 years of this pandemic, many families were struggling. We worked to make sure that they had access to culturally appropriate food, because while the food banks were available, they didn't provide food to the families that we serve in this community here. And so we made sure that our families had access to food that we know they would eat. Additionally, during the pandemic, when the county had $5 million to get out to the community and didn't know how to get that money out, it was my organization, it was us that connected with all of these communities all across the counties to ensure that they had the funding to be able to pay for rent, utilities, food, and kept them inside their homes and safe. During this pandemic, the API community was also blamed for this entire pandemic, which meant that many of our community members felt unsafe. They were being attacked. They were being targeted. So we had to ensure that we found ways that our community would be able to feel safe. I do this work every day, not just on the weekends, not just in the evenings. On the weekends, I'm working to ensure that our families have access to vaccines and that they're getting their taxes prepared, just like what we're doing now. As a council member in District 4, I would say I'm the largest district in the entire city. And that in that district, we have done things.
Mr. Porter's turn for an opening statement.
Well, again, my name is Reverend Dr. Tecoy Porter. I serve as the senior pastor of the Genesis Church in South Sacramento. I've been doing that for 22 years, and I come from a long line of servant leaders who have dedicated our lives to the space. I'm a third-generation pastor. I have also lived in Elk Grove for over 30 years, and I had the opportunity to see Elk Grove grow from a rural agricultural community to the thriving city that it is today. The church that I pastor is in the heart of South Sacramento in the Menifee community. And in my 22 years of pastoring there, I've created various outreach programs to address food and clothing insecurity, educational and health inequities, along with after-school programs for our youth, as well as youth athletic leagues to get our kids off the street. And I recently partnered with the school system to construct a TK through 5th grade elementary school that has a capacity to serve 400 students there in that community, which I'm honored. And I'm honored to have it named after myself, Tecoy Porter College Prep. I lift this up to tell you that name it. We have probably done it as a private citizen and in the public service space for our community for all of these years. And that's why in March 2018, when the world came to Meadowview because of the tragic death of Stephon Clark, I created a local civil rights and social justice chapter through a partnership with Reverend Al Sharpton called the National Action Network Sacramento. And through that experience, I've been on the front lines demanding criminal justice reform, greater inclusion, and equal opportunities at the city, state, and even federal levels. I've also advocated to remove laws that sustain systemic racism and address inequities found in our health and education systems. And through my political advocacy, my organization co-sponsored leading police and social justice reform legislation in our state, with like AB 392, the use of force bill, AB 1196, the ban of corduroy chokeholds. And as a result of my work, I've gained endorsements from Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, Assembly members, Mike Gibson, Chris Holden, former Sacramento City Council members. All right.
Thanks, Mr. Porter.
And all that.
I hate to interrupt people. If you guys force me to, I will. All
Goes
right.
by really fast.
Okay, Mr. Rigard.
I'm conservative. I am Christian. And a little bit about myself. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, moved to the Bay Area in 1982. Yeah, as soon as I graduated from UCLA, and moved to the Bay Area in 98, moved to Oakland in 98. No, not 98, 86. Married my beautiful wife, Jacqueline, moved up to Sacramento in 98, where we lived just outside of Elk Grove on Elk Grove, Florin and Calvine. Went up to El Dorado Hills, came back down because my daughter was going to be going to school, and they were going through the whole transgender thing. Didn't know what they wanted to do in the school district up there, so I brought her down here, went to Bradshaw Christian. She graduated from Consumers River High School, and that's what brings me here today. I have been a part of Star Parker's CURE, Center for Urban Renewal and Education, and that's what really started opening my eyes to things in politics. I just see some things that are being passed and being done, you know, where parents' rights are being taken from them, and we are usurping our God-given rights are being taken away from us little by little. And there's small things that we don't really think about, and then we find ourselves so far away from what our original intent was. Let me get rid of the elephant in the room. I am the only Republican on the board, on the panel here. And I'm a Republican because of one thing that I read in the Republican platform, and that was racial justice and racial reconciliation. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. I'm at the process of starting a crisis pregnancy center here in South Sacramento, and would love to be involved with anybody who's willing to work on that. My wife, Jackie, is a refugee from Korea.
Thanks.
She was left on.
Thanks, Mr. Rigard.
No problem.
Thanks. All right. So I'll ask the first question. The state, as we all know, has a massive housing shortage measured in millions of units by most estimates. The legislature has struggled to make much of a dent in that. The most recent success of sorts is to legalize duplexes and fourplexes in most of the state. That's facing a lot of resistance already from local governments. And it's even if it does proceed in most places, it's going to be a relatively incremental difference in terms of the number of units. I'm wondering what each of you would like to do as a legislator to speed the kind of massive construction of multifamily housing we need in the states, cities, and suburbs to make any difference to housing prices and homelessness. And we can go in reverse order this time, start with Mr. Rigard.
Yeah, I'd like to change some of the regulation. I believe that developers are burdened with regulation in order to build. And that needs to be lifted. If we're expecting them to roll up their sleeves and get involved with building for us and helping to get those units built, then we've got to take some of that regulation and set it aside for the purpose of building these new homes. So I'd say regulation is a huge thing that the legislature could definitely help with.
All right, thank you, Reverend Porter.
Yeah, we have to work with our providers or developers and streamline the process to build here in California. Right now, we know that we're very encumbered in that area, and so we need to streamline that. Also, seek out innovative ways of how to create more, not just more housing, but repurpose housing as well. And so I support the fourplex and duplex. I think we need to keep pushing that. I know people want to protect. I live in Elk Grove, so I understand how single family homeowners want to protect their property. And I believe we can get both done. It's a both and. We just need to go ahead and work together with everyone to make sure this is done. We have to get this done because we need to make California a place where everybody can afford a home.
Thanks. Ms. Nguyen?
Thank you. So we just approved in the city of Elk Grove, we just approved our housing elements. And, you know, what we saw and all across the cities, all across the board was that we had very low numbers of affordable housing. And so one of the things that we've done is taken a look at how we can build more affordable housing complexes in our city. And what we've done and what I've talked to our city about is making sure that they're not all convoluted in one area and that they're spread across the entire city, spread across all other areas. You know, Mr. Rigard and Mr. Tecoy Porter talked about a pathway, which I completely agree on, is that there needs to be a streamlined pathway for these houses to be available and to be able to be built quick. The duplexes and the fourplexes are great. If we look at homelessness, once upon a time, once you turn 18, you moved into an apartment complex, you went to college, you got a job, you bought a house, you moved out of the apartment so that the next person can come in. We don't have that anymore. We don't have enough apartment complexes. We don't have enough affordable housing, hence the homelessness issue that we have. And so we really need to do whatever we can to take a look at all across the cities where we can build more affordable housing. Duplexes and fourplexes are great. I think they're a great way for folks that are in apartment complexes to move into the next step and then maybe into a small home. But even if you're a single family home now looking to move into something bigger, those aren't available right now. And so I think we need to look for a pathway for builders to be able to build more faster, be able to build at a rate in which they can afford it, because right now it's not affordable. All the fees that are tacked on top of fees makes it really difficult for them to be able to build quick and be able to meet the needs of the numbers that we all have to meet. 30 seconds. I'll waive my 30 seconds. For the next question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Guerra.
Thank you very much. Well, first, I think replicating some of the things that the city of Sacramento has already done, which is ministerial approval processes, so we can expedite those projects. We set good standards, and then we make it clear to the community about how we can move these projects faster. And I think replicating that at the state is important. Second, we need, before we can even build a door, we can't even, it's paying for the wet stuff, the water, sewer, stormwater drainage. That's all public infrastructure. In times right now where we have a $31 billion surplus, we should be using that into the public infrastructure for infill projects. We have vacant lots on Stockton Boulevard, on Franklin Boulevard, Mack Road, a lot of these areas where we could actually put some of that state surplus, which is also public work. So we're getting people back to work with that. addressing the gap financing. When we want to look at affordable housing, nonprofit affordable housing that's subsidized, that has the wraparound services, most of these projects have significant gap financing. So looking at having the state in our budget every year say a commitment of how much we go to tackle and bring down that gap financing. If not, we'll never get these projects off the ground. We're starting Mercy Housing's 220 units, that had a $15 million gap financing. Mutual Housing that I'm working with right now on San Juan, $22 million gap financing. Zoning laws, making sure we allow and put more pressure so zoning has more options. Not everybody for their first home can be a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 3-car garage. We have to expand the different types of housing so people can start at a smaller home, where young families, once they leave their apartment, they can start and buy a smaller home. And by doing that, we have to make sure that the zoning laws allow for that and put pressure on that. And finally, before I get to my final piece, is we have to address the workforce shortage. There's an opportunity right now, because we have a retiring building trades community, to begin to expand that. Now, I've worked with the Charles A. Jones Center, and as chair of the Employment Training Agency, I've been pushing to put more funding into workforce training in that. And that's why I'm endorsed by many of the construction trades in this effort. And finally, again, holding cities accountable that are not doing their part. The reason we see a lot of pressure in Sacramento is because so many small cities in other parts of the state, particularly the Bay Area, are not doing their part. So the pressures are pushing over here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Guerra. All right, I'll let someone else ask a question.
Yeah, I can jump in. My name is Yusuf Beg. I'm our assistant opinion editor, and I cover city issues for our board. And I wanted to touch on something Eric was just mentioning, which is local control. That's often quite a big part of the conversation around the state when folks are trying to determine how much discretion local policymakers should have on that process. And I'd be curious to hear kind of how each of you fall on that debate, and whether you feel like cities and counties and legislative bodies at the local level should have as much discretion as they often, I think, like to have. And so, Eric, kind of where do you fall on that local discretion debate?
Yeah, look, obviously, not everything can be cookie cutter. So that's why in our ministerial approval process, we do have avenues for local engagement, and that's critical. I think if you don't have that, then you'll have projects that don't fit that area need. But the fact is, the current amount of overall discretion right now is creating that pressure, or some cities create, don't do their part. And so that's where I do feel that we have to change and put more requirement on cities, and also to follow through on their general plan requirements. Making sure that they are actually building the work that they do. So so looking around those loopholes. So when it comes to local control, I do think that making sure that we not allow it to jeopardize the overall needs of the state. And frankly, I think it can be done at the regional level, because that's really what affects the housing impacts, is regional issues. So if we can solve those at the regional level versus the state level, that would have more of an impact.
Can you go next? Mm-hmm.
Yes, Stephanie, please.
Okay, great, thank you. So I do believe that there are some areas in which we need to have it be local controls, right? There's a reason why we have different cities. There's a reason why we have drawn lines for districts. There's a reason why we put, different types of areas together, why we're all separated by different districts, and how each one of us represent a certain district, a certain city, because they're all different. They all have different communities that live there. They all have different needs. They all have different requirements. And so as an elected person in our city, that's our job, is to be able to hear from our people, hear from our district, and understand them. And so we as an elected body, as a city, should be able to have control or have say in what happens in our city. Now, Councilmember Guerra, I agree with him in the fact that there is no cookie cutter. And so there are areas in which we do need to be able to have a county make a decision on it, or even statewide, right? As we take a look at the pandemic, I worked very closely with the county and thought it was great that there was mask mandates, right, and ordinance and whatnot. And that's something I believe needed to be done as a county. I also know that we all work as efforts in taking a look at regionally how we can impact our community together, and that we have these conversations where each representative is from different different cities come together to talk about how we can work together regionally. But we all understand that our cities are different than other cities. I may be a council member for the city of Elk Grove, and I work in South Sacramento, but I also understand that two different areas have two different needs, two different values, two different beliefs, all of that as a whole. And that's why I think it's best that there are some areas which there needs to be local control, and that there are areas in which there needs to be, you know, county and statewide and whatnot too. It depends on the issue and the topic.
Yeah, Mr. Porter, I mean, where do you kind of fall in that debate of whether, you know, cities should preserve control or the state should come in on housing decisions?
So here's my experience in this matter is that local control cities and counties need to be held accountable for the funding that's given to them by the state and via by the nationally. And so what we found, you know, during the pandemic, you know, we found that not all the money got to where it was needed to go to. And so there has to be, I believe in local control, but then I also believe that they need to be held accountable for making sure that the funding gets to where it's supposed to go. We've seen it in the paper. You guys have reported, you know, where the city and the county got sued because all the money for care money and the new money didn't get to the places where it needed to go to, all went to the police. And so there's more instances about, more concerns about that happening than other things. I live in Elk Grove. And I work in South Sacramento. It's a tale of two cities. We're seeing, you know, how those things are. Elk Grove has its fair share of prosperity, if you will, and control. But then then South Sacramento struggles, you know, and has struggled for years, and that's in part due to not our local elected officers not being held accountable for those funds coming down for these areas. And so I think if you can receive funds from the state, make sure that you are held accountable, and that's what I would do.
Thank you, Mr. Rigard.
Yeah, no problem. You know, I believe that cities and counties, they should have their own set of I want to say a vision almost of what they want their city or their municipality to look like. However, I think it's incumbent upon each and every one of us on this panel to go beyond that and to touch the people that are living in this district, in Elk Grove, in South Sacramento, and communicate back and forth with them, because people will give you good feedback. They understand that it's a problem, that it's something that needs to be addressed. And if you talk to them, if you seek out what they want to have done, they'll be able to give you some wise counsel as to what to do, how to move forward, you know, and then we can employ some of that. And then the people will recognize that we are now listening to them. We're listening to their voice, and we're employing some of the things that they want to have happen within the district to what happens actually in the district. So I think going beyond and getting to the voter is what's really required. And we can have our own, each city, not a problem. Have your own agenda, have your own plan, but we need to get to that voter to be able to speak to them and communicate with them.
Hi, my name is Hannah Holzer, and I'm opinion assistant. I'm going to switch topics to talk about another topic that I know is weighing heavy on all of us, and that's gun violence. So California has more and tougher gun laws than most states, but legislators are still looking for ways to stem the sort of violence that has wrecked Sacramento this year. Do you believe the legislature should pass an excise tax on guns to fund violence prevention programs, a version of which died last year for lack of support? And if not, what else can state lawmakers do about this? And Mr. Guerra, let's start with you.
Well, the first answer to your question is yes. I think we need to do more education and intervention. And particularly, I mean, I remember as a 15-year-old going to hunter safety and hunter training to be able to understand that. I don't know how much that happens even today, but making sure that we go after and look at education and our youth is important. I've been working with Moms Demand Action also on safe gun storage. You would be surprised how many people I talk to who bought their gun legally but don't store it safely. And there's that accidents that could happen at home too, let alone if it if the gun is stolen or one other situation. But I do think we have to tackle that issue. And the other piece too is engaging in the youth intervention early on, and making sure that we are talking about the value of life, because I don't think we have that as much. But yes, to your first question, I do think so, and I think there are other tactics, and working with organizations like Moms Demand Action and Brady Campaign to be able to find data outcome solutions.
Thank you. Reverend Porter?
Yeah, so America is the most violent developed country in the world. I mean, throughout the world and stuff. And it's crazy. And we have to do something in regards to gun trafficking and drug trafficking. And that's what we have not heard throughout this whole mass shooting. About, we paid a lot of attention to the gas, like saying gas, but to the gangs and all of that. But then we have not heard anything about gun trafficking. How are these guns and drugs getting into these neighborhoods? So that they're not just popping up all of a sudden. And this is, again, has gone for years and years. So we need, yes, on the excise tax for guns, but will that really help? I'm not too sure, because we have to really address the root of the issue, which is gun trafficking, which is drug trafficking, which is also poverty, deep-seated poverty within these areas that we have not addressed, and we see that throughout everything we do, housing, healthcare, education, the list goes on and on. And so I think we have to do even more than that. We have to work with our federal government in making sure that we stop gun trafficking and drug trafficking in California.
Thank you. Mr. Rigard?
Yeah, I somewhat agree with Dr. Porter's assessment that drug trafficking and gun trafficking definitely need to be addressed. The quote unquote ghost guns that are out there, the guns that have no serial numbers, the guns that are used illicitly in crimes, they're not the registered gun owners who know how to handle their guns, who do lock them up. Some of them may not, and they do need to be educated about that. But for the most part, that's not the issue. It's those random guns that are out there that are running around that people are using, and they're using not thinking of any particular result being there. In part of the training and part of the education that we need to do, we've got to drive home the fact that if you have a gun and it's registered and it's constitutionally protected, everything is great. Take care of it, keep it up, do what you need to. But if you use a gun in the commission of a crime and it's unregistered and it's not something that belongs, that is something that really tears us down as a society. And we've got to get rid of those. We've got to get rid of that. A lot of it is used quite often in lower economic communities, in poverty-stricken communities. But we've got to drive home the point that they're unacceptable, and we cannot have that out there, and it can't be assigned to you, or else it will tar you forever.
Thanks. And finally, Ms. Nguyen?
Thank you, Hannah. And you could just call me Stephanie. I'm married to a police officer, an officer who's worked for the city of Elk Grove for nearly 15 years now. And I can hear him, saying in the back of my head, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And when the guns get in the wrong hands of the people, that's what we come across. And, I think the question was taking the funds and moving it towards youth. And I completely agree with that. My office, both South Sacramento and also Oak Park, is a safe place for young people. You can't understand this if you don't know the situation, but if you are from a family that is in a gang, if your grandpa was one, your uncle was one, your dad was one, you are going to be one. That's the way it works. And there are some kids that I run across, some young kids that I run across, that they don't want that life, but they have nowhere else to go. And so sometimes they want to skip school. Sometimes they don't want to be there. They don't want to go home. And we've opened up our doors for them and said, hey, you know what? come here. You want to skip school? Don't get yourself in trouble. I've always said an at-risk youth isn't just youth that come from low-income communities, isn't just youth that are from gang families, but an at-risk youth is a youth that has absolutely nothing to do. Yes, they come from low-income, impoverished, disenfranchised community, but also like us as adults, we're at risk when we have nothing to do because we start looking for things to get in trouble. And so your young people are exactly the same way. But we do need to find ways in which we can have a place that these young folks can go to and feel safe. And while we can't keep them safe all night long because they eventually have to go home, we can at least give them an avenue that they can go into and be at for the time being. And we can still guide them into the right direction. As it relates to gun control, I agree with Mr. Rigard and Mr. Porter. Dang it, I'm up on time already. Hold on, I wanted to talk about how my family, was from South Sacramento. We needed access to a gun to protect ourselves when the home invasion was happening. And that it was one of those things where it was like, you know what, I know somebody that has a gun that we can get it for you. That stuff is real. That actually really happens. So you do have families that need access to one to protect themselves. Okay, I'll stop.
So the Public Utilities Commission is considering a reform of rooftop solar programs that give generous subsidies to households and make it easier for widespread adoption. Utility companies say that the costs of these programs get pushed onto lower income communities and residents. So this is more of a two-part question for you. Where do you stand on this issue, and what role does rooftop solar play in California's clean energy transition? And let's start with Eric Rigard.
Okay, you said rooftop solar?
Yes. So I'll repeat. Where do you stand on the issue of the Public Utilities Commission considering a reform of rooftop solar programs to make it easier subsidies for low-income families? And what role does rooftop solar play in California's clean energy transition?
Sure. I think rooftop solar is excellent, actually. I think that it's a viable method of reducing a lot of our energy needs. And I do see where we're changing maybe the subsidy landscape, to help those who are a little bit down on their luck or who are a little bit lower, lower economic stage in life to be able to afford it. To be able to employ it, because we want to have as many people employ that technology as possible. So let's do something to help them out, help get them there, while not taking it away from those who are using it currently. But let's get something that balances that thing out and allows them access to it so that they're able to utilize it. I definitely agree with that. Do I see it as being a panacea for everything? No. Our energy is so convoluted right now. We need all of the energy that we possibly have. We here in the United States burn gasoline, which I know is taboo, cleaner than anybody in the world. Okay, but we do need to transition to renewable energy sources, and we need those renewable energy sources to cost us a little bit less to actually enter in to be able to participate. So yes, I would say definitely let's make sure that we can readjust that so that more people can participate and it doesn't cost them so much.
Thank you. Let's go with Stephanie next.
I happen to know, just because of the organization and the amount of families that we serve, many of them come through our doors asking for a utilities discount, and they have to reapply again every year and get it renewed. And when that happens, they do come in and they do ask for the discount services. It is definitely the number one thing that the communities that I work with and that I serve rely on, is that utility discount program. And so as far as making sure that we reform and give these discounts to these communities so that they can have access to this, absolutely, I would be on board with that. We're in California. The sun is here. Not today, but the sun is here. We definitely need to take advantage of the fact that we have that and use some of that. And the second question, or did I answer that second question within that response?
The second question was, what role do you believe rooftop solar plays in clean energy?
Yeah, I mean, that I mean, that's it, clean energy, right? If we're looking to move forward in this world of clean energy and getting to a path in which my kids and grandkids can live and breathe this air, we need to put those programs in place so that everybody has access to it. If without these discounted programs, without these incentives, we'll never get there. And especially the communities that I work with will be left behind. And so I think they play a big role in this as we take a look at climate change and how we're moving forward.
And let's do Reverend Tecoy next.
Great. So the rooftop solar program does play a vital role in our transition to clean, renewable, and sustainable energy. We just want to make sure it's equitable, right? And so the new reforms here, we want to make sure, I haven't read throughout the whole deal, but we do want to make sure there's not sun tax, right? That we're not paying sun tax on this new reform that we have here. If we are moving that toward this way, for renewable energy, I do agree with Eric and Stephanie on this. We have to make sure that it is accessible to everybody, and especially our low income and Black and brown communities where they have been just, hammered with environmental hazards and inadequate access to healthy foods and insufficient water pollution and just various things, pollution, period. And so we want to make sure that's equitable to all of these, to all communities. And I do agree with any reforms that we have to make it such.
That's me next, Robin.
And Mr. Guerra.
Yeah, thank you. First, I think if there's anything I learned in engineering school is our policy should not be technology specific. Something may come up in the future that has a better application. And what the PUC is trying to resolve is the cost of infrastructure and the maintenance infrastructure that happens with the current rooftop solar program. So I do think that there is a way to help and assist those middle income and lower income families who were the early ones who said, you know what, I want to jump into rooftop solar. And because of it, there was a subsidy for that. So we should figure out how to honor those folks, but not subsidize those that are well off. So I do think there is a difference in that because there were early commitments made to because of that. To your question, again, does rooftop solar play a role? Yes, it does. But we should not be technology specific either. I mean, there are advances now in distributive energy, and the fact that now SMUD and now in my role in the Air District, we're looking at solar farms and ways to be able to reduce the overall cost of producing more solar energy. We should be open to those and making sure that they're equitable, not at the cost again of those who early on were middle income, low income, and said, hey, I want to use this again, but ways to look at how we build in the future. We're learning each time and making sure that, as we move forward, we look at other options. I mean, right now, the biggest thing that I think is how does hydrogen, both through fuel cell sectors, play a huge role for distributive energy? Oh yeah, is that time, Josh? Oh no, I heard something else, but
that was 30 seconds.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. And so to your point again, I think, rooftop solar is an option. We shouldn't be technology specific. We should figure out how to make sure that the burden and the cost of infrastructure doesn't impact the lowest income people. So moving forward, figuring out how do you address that?
While we're on this general topic, I'm wondering what you all think of the several proposals to help people with gas prices. They've ranged from suspending gas taxes altogether to providing cash rebates across the board. I think the governor's proposal would provide cash rebates regardless of income. One of the proposals from the legislature is limited to up to $250,000 household income, which is about 90% of households. So I'm just wondering what you think the right policy is, if any. Does it make sense to ease gas consumption given the repercussions for the climate? And does it make sense to provide rebates across the board, or should they be limited by income? And we can start with Stephanie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think there are a lot of families struggling right now. Families still have to go to work. People still have to go to work, and so this gas increase has definitely impacted many working families. Something needs to be done. We should do something to help with some of the relief in what they're paying. What does that mean, and what should be done? I will be honest, I don't know. I know that we need to do something. We need to make sure that the working families that continue to go to work every single day, take their kids to school, having to go to the supermarket to shop for their kids and their families. We need to do something to help these families. And I would say taking a look at everything and considering everything before something is put on the table. So I do believe something needs to be done. What that looks like, I don't know yet. But we need to consider everything and how it's going to impact everybody. I think your proposal said that the income has gone up, the threshold for the income has gone up, but what does that impact? Who does that impact? Where does the money come from? I think we need to look at everything before we consider something.
All right, thanks. Councilman Guerra?
Well, first, if we were to give back rebates, I think we should, where it's most effective is those at the very bottom rung. I mean, if you're talking about your janitors, even your landscape folks, people who have to actually get to work and don't have options because of the failures in the current public transportation system, I think that's where we would have to prioritize. I'd like to see us use that money for the scrap and replace program and making sure we expand that. Because most of the time when you talk about low-income families, we call them, carcanchas, other people call them jalapis. They also have the cars that are the worst, the polluters. They're breaking down all the time. They're most unreliable. So expanding on the current program of the scrap and replace or scrap and forget, where we've given people rebates to use public transportation and to use other forms of transportation that affect our environment. Being able to get people a good new electric vehicle that's reliable versus just rebating that, I think might be a better use of our dollars. The other thing is, I think that if we have to look at what one budget action has an impact on the overall budget. I mean, every time we try to look at one idea and people try to respond immediately, I say, well, what does that impact have to the other budget pressures that we're trying to resolve at the time? Yes, we have a problem right now with escalating gas prices and costs, but we also have challenges in our education, challenges to fund more childcare providers and making sure that those childcare providers don't close down. So I would say, when we look at that, what does it mean for the other cost pressures before we just hand out everybody a check to go spend it out on gas?
Thanks. Mr. Porter.
So I'm like this, let's hand out the checks, right? Let's go ahead and do that and make it opt-in. It's really simple. Right now, we're seeing people discuss this, and we throw all these ideas. And as we discuss it, nothing is happening. People are still suffering, under these high gas prices, and trying to figure things out while it gets stuck in debate. And that's one of the things that I believe that people are tired of, all the debate that goes behind something that's probably really simple. Make it opt-in. And people will find a way. If we do that, we have to make sure we do not make it cumbersome, right? And stuff. So a lot of times trying to get a stimulus or get this funding that we've seen from the pandemic or what have you, it's been a cumbersome process. And so we need to streamline the process. I believe make it opt-in, keep it simple. But the important point is do something now so that people can feel it. And people can have it, and it'll be a win if we do it. Go ahead and make that work.
Thanks. Mr. Rigard?
Yeah, I see this as being kind of multifaceted. What brings the quickest relief the fastest? And for those people who are on the bottom rung who really need the help, a gas tax holiday would be great. We've taken an extra 15 cents gas tax. Our governor has said he's not using it for that. He's not using it to fix the roads. He's going to put it in the general fund and use it for other projects that he has. Well, that's it. You know, he wants to do that, no problem. But at the same time, we've got people that are suffering under the current gas prices that we have now. So I would like to see them have some relief. The second proposal that came up from the legislature is really just a handout. Seems to be more of a handout. The one that the governor came up with that tied it to the actual registration of vehicles seemed a little bit more plausible. However, we've got to do something. We've got the highest gas tax almost in the nation, and we need to do something that's going to help bring some relief to those people who are on the road driving, trying to get back and forth to work. And they're the people who need, the people up at the upper end. Once you started to up the gas prices, if they were going to make an adjustment, they've made an adjustment to their driving and everything else already. Those who cannot afford to, who've got to get to work, need some help, and we got to be able to help them out. So I would say that we would, number one, use a gas tax holiday. Number two, use a gas refund them based on, or give them some money based on the number of cars that they've got registered. And the fourth item that's out there, which is to set it up to be a tax against manufacturers, is just about taxing the rich and the, you know, it's.
Thanks, Mr. Rigard. Thanks.
All right.
Other questions? I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, I maybe we can pivot to COVID. Obviously, we're in kind of the final stage, hopefully, of this pandemic, and the legislature has tried to institute proof of vaccine requirements in indoor spaces and workplaces, but those are withdrawn. And there's also a bill to address COVID vaccines in schools that's still being considered right now. With some signs that a surge could be coming, or there may be sort of future realities that need to be considered when we get back into the colder months. I mean, how far should lawmakers be going to ensure that they're protecting communities should there be another surge where something like this becomes a real reality? So Stephanie, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm on the line in the crunches with this. So my staff, we do vaccines in partnership with the county. I've seen during the weekly COVID testing folks that come through that were not vaccinated and those that were vaccinated, and how I've seen we'd had to call the ambulance and the fire truck because a gentleman was not vaccinated coming through to get tested, and we knew right away that he was COVID positive. And so I've seen what this virus does to communities and what it does to families. The minute my kids were available to get vaccinated, I signed them up and I got them vaccinated right away. As a matter of fact, within our own agencies, we mandated it and made it that everybody must be vaccinated in order to work for the organization. And that right now, while we've been able to let folks self-identify whether they're vaccinated or not to go maskless, we do check. We do ask that you show proof of full vaccination if you want to come into the organization, the agency, and receive services that you are vaccinated. And that is because I have a duty to protect the people, the community that we work with, and the folks that come into the organization. And when my kids go to school, I know that they're around other kids that may not be vaccinated and other individuals too. So I worry as a mother. I worry for my children as well too. The fact that people are dying because of this is real. I work with the Pacific Islander community, the Marshallese community, and their numbers skyrocketed because they had multiple families living under one roof, and that they watched as they buried their mother, sister, and daughter all in one funeral service. And so I've seen this. I know this. I see this every single day. I would be all in favor of vaccine mandates. Absolutely. I think it protects our community. It protects all of us. It protects my family. It protects your family as well too. And we need to control this so we don't see another variant come across. We keep seeing all these other variants, and it's because people aren't getting vaccinated and it's mutating.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Reverend Porter.
Yeah, so I too have worked, like Stephanie, with the communities in regard to vaccination, distribution, testing, 953, 95832, and 33 was a highly impacted zip code from COVID, and we worked very hard to make sure people were tested and vaccinated there. COVID disproportionately hit certain communities, not just health-wise, but jobs, education, business, and all that. We say that it's ending, but I think it's here to stay, and we have to figure out that right there. So whatever mandates that we need to make to keep people safe, we need to go ahead and do that. And it's just about learning to live with it. But I believe that we have to, we cannot ignore it, right? We have to watch out for misinformation that's out there. Right now, we're in a campaign that's focused on the family and kids, 5 through 11, 12 through 17, and make sure that they get vaccinated. And we just need to stay vigilant in that and do all we can to make sure people stay safe, and so that we don't come back to what we saw before when this pandemic first occurred, especially in our, again, low-income Black and Brown communities.
Mr. Rigard?
Yeah, I see vaccines and vaccine mandates as they are necessary for a certain portion of the population. Those who have got comorbidities, those who have weakened immune systems. I mean, the science is clear on what the needs are, but as we're learning now, science is also kind of flexing a little bit on natural immunity, on people who have had COVID once before, and that sort of thing. So there is still an element of choice that's needed here for the individual, and they assess their own, responsibility and their own susceptibility, I think, to COVID. And I think that people need to still have that choice. I would never want to tell anybody or assuage someone not to get a vaccine. I would actually tell them to get one. If you have any questions, any doubts, go ahead and get it. But if you are moving right along, you've had COVID, you've gotten over it, you're doing fine, everything is working for you, then you can make that judgment on your own. That's the way I see it. I just believe that people should have that personal freedom, that personal responsibility, and not to just stab in the face, I can do it because I'm making this decision, that you've actually thought through the decision and that you've made it consciously as an individual.
Councilman Guerra?
Thank you. Well, first, one, I've got 2 kids that are under the vaccination age. And for me, the fact that there are many people who are not vaccinated, and when these outbreaks happen, it puts a lot of families at risk. And unless you, have kids that are under that age or people who are compromised community, you have no idea of the level of stress that you go through. So for me, I do support vaccine mandates, and I do support masking mandates. Now, as an assembly member, here's the important thing, I think, through the whole experience. We have to make sure that we empower and give, that the freedom for our public health officials to be able to guide immediately. Because if not, having worked in the legislature for so many years, you can get into a situation where public opinion guides health policy. And we need to have science and health experts help guide health policy. So I do think that making sure that we're empowering both our health officers at the state and at the local level, our Surgeon General and our county health officers. And then also what we can do as elected officials and as assembly member is making sure that if our health officials are missing a mark on an issue. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, I called Dr. Beelan and had him meet with a number of people and thank you to the Bee for calling him out. We were concerned that these numbers would affect the Latino community significantly and low-income communities. And sure enough, 2 months later, we saw the spikes go disproportionately. We saw the spikes disproportionately in low-income communities. And so that is a strong role that elected officials can play in that. But when it comes to a health policy, we have to support our health officials in that. And I do support the fact that we should encourage more vaccinations. That's what the science is showing. and masking mandates when the numbers go up to help maintain that. If we can manage those in times and periods, then we can reduce shutdowns and school closures that are affecting our kids. And the few people who it affects more is people who can't telecommute, people who don't have schooling outside of home and have to rely on our traditional system. I think I'm out of time there, but thank you, Josh, for that as well.